Jesus taught with authority. He taught about the heart. His words, his examples, using a coin, talking about water. He taught simple yet profound lessons that convict and apply even today. One of the things that really gets me excited when we talk about the life of Jesus is the teaching that he did. People have described him as a master communicator, and one of the things that really stands out is his ability to say such powerful things in such short spans of time with such simple illustrations.
Jesus' teaching was so simple. However, there's some hidden nuances in a lot of things he taught that we don't fully appreciate because we're separated by time. When he's telling the story of the Good Samaritan, he doesn't describe the road. It's because the people of that time understood how dangerous that road was. And when he's talking about paying taxes to Caesar, he talks about the denarius. To us, that's just a coin. But to the people of that time, they understood everything that was involved with that coin.
So you're saying that there's a cultural and historical gap between the people who originally heard Jesus' teaching and ourselves. And if we come to be more familiar with their history and with their culture, that we'll have a better understanding of what Jesus was communicating to them.
We are at the Church of the Beatitudes, which is on the northern side of the Sea of Galilee. It's built on top of a site that was established in the 4th century. And I wanted to bring you up here because this is the possible location of one of the most famous sermons that Jesus ever spoke. In Matthew 5, verses 1, it says, "Seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him." And of course, we know this as the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. Now, whether it happened exactly here or somewhere near here, the geography of the area fits the description in the Bible very closely.
It has fantastic gardens. As soon as you walk up, you're just greeted by these flowering bushes and trees and shade, and the rest of the hillside doesn't have that. So to walk up to such an incredibly beautiful place is special.
This area would have been very important for Jesus. Not only did he live here, but there's a strategic importance as well. The Via Maris ran from Egypt all the way up to Mesopotamia. And so anybody traveling through this area would have listened to the teaching of Jesus or heard some of the stories about some of the things he did and would have been able to carry the news of that throughout the world.
Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, Matthew takes up 3 chapters to cover that, Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Luke also takes up quite a bit at the beginning of his gospel. And there are a lot of people that have talked about what that sermon meant. There's some people that view Jesus just as a political revolutionary. There's some people that see him as just a good moral teacher like Aesop and his fables. But really, Jesus doesn't leave any room for those kinds of ideas. He's not speaking as just another teacher. He's not speaking as a rabbi. He's speaking with authority. In chapter 5, you have him repeatedly say, "You've heard it said, but I say to you." And then when you get to chapter 6, he's helping them understand that there's a difference between how people are practicing their religion to be seen by others and how you really need to get to the heart of things. Over in chapter 7, he puts himself in a position of being able to judge at the end of time. He set himself up as much more than just a man. To read through his sermon, you can't just go through and say, well, this is a list of good things to do, or these are good suggestions. Jesus is speaking from a position of authority, which makes him to be divine. All the way through the Sermon on the Mount, he's trying to explain what it looks like when people belong to his kingdom, this spiritual kingdom, starting with the Beatitudes, what it means to pray, making sure you do things with your focus on heaven and not trying to please men, the golden rule, which almost everyone is familiar with, and then he closes it with a 3-part invitation, and that last part is where he's challenging people to think about what they're building their lives on. Are they going to build their lives on anything other than God, which is like building your house on sand? Or are you going to build your life and your house on the authority of Jesus and his teaching as the Son of God. And if you do that, you're like someone who builds your house on a rock that's going to be able to weather whatever kind of storm life may throw at you.
I would have loved to have been in the audience. When he got through, they were amazed at his authority.
To think about being at the top of the mountain from Jesus' perspective and looking down and seeing all these people that were so spiritually hungry finally being fed is just overwhelming. And the fact that we're able to sit at his feet today and experience the exact same thing, no matter where we may be sitting or no matter where we may live, we can experience the exact same teaching.
At the very end of the Sermon on the Mount, it says that he left the mount and he went down to Capernaum. And if you look over my shoulder, you can actually see Capernaum just down the hill from where we are. It's a wonderful illustration of what we read in the Bible.
We know Jesus did a lot of teaching on the northern side of the Sea of Galilee. There's that triangle up here on the north between three cities where he did 80% of his ministry. Now, where would we go from here to see some of those places?
Well, we want to go down to the Cove of the Sower. This is where he pushed off into the water just a little ways so he could speak to the people on the hillside.
Well, I think this is right. You can correct me. You have never led a tour group down to the Cove of the Sower.
No.
And why is that?
It's almost impossible to get to.
Okay, so it was amazing to go to. It was a lot of work. It was worth the work. But the average person coming to Israel is not going to make that stop.
No, from the place that we found to park that we could access it, it was probably 45 minutes hike.
Over rocks.
It was very difficult to get there. Jeremy, we've come to the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee, and as you can tell, there's a natural cove here in the shoreline just behind us. In the mid-1980s, there was a drought in this area, and the water level dropped and exposed a number of harbors around the Sea of Galilee.
We know from Luke chapter 5 that one of the times Jesus was coming along this side of the sea, there were a lot of people crowding around him trying to hear him. And when he got to some spot around here, he got into a boat with Peter and pushed back from the shore and spoke up to the people that were still on the land. Now, standing here in this cove, you can turn around and see it forms kind of a natural amphitheater. And it's really easy to imagine Jesus. This is his stage as he turns and faces the people and speaks up to them.
Many people have questioned whether or not Jesus could actually be heard by a large group of people if he's a few feet off the shoreline. Let's do an experiment. Let me go up the hill a little ways, and when I get up there, I want you to read the parable of the sower in a natural but loud speaking voice, and let me see if I can hear it.
Sounds good.
Okay, Jeremy, I'm in position. Go ahead and read that passage and let me see if I can hear you.
All right, I'm going to read from Matthew 13.
That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea, and great crowds gathered about him, so that he got into a boat and sat down.
The instant he started talking, I thought for a second he was still using the intercom. I could hear him perfectly. No doubt if I was twice as far away, I could have heard him easily.
And the whole crowd stood on the beach, and he told them many things in parables, saying,
A sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil, and produced grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears, let him hear. The parable of the sower really marked the beginning of Jesus using parables in his ministry. That one really paved the way. And you finally get to the end of the parable and Jesus has this invitation. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Explaining even to his disciples afterwards, who didn't get the parable, that we need to make sure that we're paying attention and allowing Jesus to teach us what he wants to teach us, and that we're going to hear and allow his word to go deep into our lives.
We had the opportunity to go out to the wilderness today, and the overlook was amazing. From the vantage point that we had, if you look to your left, which would have been to the west, you could have seen the top of the Mount of Olives. And if you look to the right, you'd been able to see Jericho all the way down. And so we're able to visualize the road that went between Jerusalem to Jericho.
It's hard to put into words what the vista looked like. There are times where Barry wants to take me someplace where he hasn't been before, and this was one of those places. So when you get to the top of a hill and you hear Barry catch his breath, you know you've found something really special. When Jesus was teaching in parables, there's a certain parable that he gave when a lawyer came to test him, and he was asking him what he needed to do to inherit eternal life. Jesus asks him, well, how do you understand the law? And he answers with, well, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second law, which is like it, is to love your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus says, you've answered correctly. The lawyer says, I've done all of those things. And then the lawyer was seeking to justify himself and asked him another question. Who is my neighbor? Trying to prove that he's good and righteous.
He answers that question by telling the people a story. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. We're on a road between Jerusalem and Jericho. Jerusalem sits about 8 miles to our west here, and you can see it up on the ridge. Jericho sits behind us about 6 or 7 miles. And I want you to look at this road in this area. It's desolate.
Totally desolate.
I think it's interesting that Jesus doesn't describe the road at all. The people at that time knew about this road. They knew how dangerous it was.
The road between Jerusalem and Jericho would have been really hot and dry and dusty. It was a place you wouldn't have wanted to have stayed for very long. This was not a hospitable place. On top of that, to have been wounded and left on the side of that road exposed, he was in really dire straits and eventually would have died if he didn't receive help. And so Jesus has set him up. He needs someone to assist him, and then starts to give several people that were in that position to assist and chose not to. There are several people that pass him by. There's a priest that sees him and passes by on the other side of the road. There's a Levite that sees him and passes by. And the person who finally stops, which would be so offensive to a Jew, is a Samaritan. And he stops and he takes care of him. He takes him down to an inn. He pays for his wounds to be bound up. It was this person that finally stopped, which would have shocked everyone that was listening to Jesus at that point.
Jesus is taking the next step. From the time of Abraham, the Israelites were God's family. This was his chosen people. And I think by including the Samaritan in this story, and by especially making the Samaritan the good guy, he's expanding that to tell the full story that he was coming to save not just the Jewish people, but everyone.
And Jesus just wraps up with a question then, who proved to be a neighbor? Making the point that loving your neighbor has nothing to do with proximity, but opportunity to do good to somebody who's in need.
In John, the 4th chapter, we have recorded this wonderful conversation between Jesus and this woman from Samaria. The scriptures tell us that took place at a well in the city of Sychar. Sychar is modern-day Nablus. Well, I want to take you to the city of Nablus because there's a Greek Orthodox church there in which contains Jacob's well that we read about in the Bible. It's an hour and 15 minutes north of Jerusalem. It's right in the middle of the West Bank. As you approach Nablus, you have the opportunity to drive through what we refer to as Samaria in the New Testament times. And one of the things that strikes you immediately is how hilly and how mountainous that area is.
Imagine walking that.
It would be very, very difficult. And the scriptures even say that Jesus, when he approached this well, he was thirsty. That's why he stopped there. wanted to bring you here and show you this because there is very, very good historical evidence to show that this is the actual hole in the ground that was dug by Jacob and his men over 3,500 years ago.
We're not able to say that very often.
No, we're not. But the historical evidence here is very, very strong.
The fact that you had a well of that nature, that depth, through that type of ground, it makes sense that they'd be able to keep track of that over such a long period of time.
So if that was the well Jacob dug, this is the same location where Jesus had this conversation with the Samaritan woman. Let me read a couple of verses here from John, the 4th chapter. So he came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there. So Jesus, wearied as he was from his journey, was sitting beside the well, and it was about the 6th hour.
To have Jesus in Samaria in the first place and to initiate this conversation with a Samaritan woman is pretty significant. The woman went into logistics. How on earth are you going to get any water? The well is really deep.
I'll tell you what, why don't you draw some water for us? Very good. Okay, Jeremy, there's one other thing I want you to do for me. I want you to dip a cup of this water and pour it down the well. And I want you to be real quiet. I want you to listen so you can see how deep it is.
How high up is that?
It's amazing, isn't it? It's got to be well over 100 feet deep.
Wow.
Yeah.
There are nuances to the story about the depth of the well that we would just gloss over. Well, of course, the well is deep. So going to that place and playing with the water really highlighted a seemingly insignificant line in this interaction between Jesus and the Samaritan woman. And there are things like that all through the Bible. And they emphasize these were real people and real places, and even those small details are important and connect us to reality. Jesus stops and interacts with a Samaritan, but not just any Samaritan. He interacts with a woman, which is culturally not normal, and he interacts with a woman of disreputable character. I mean, she's had multiple husbands. He's never met her before, but he understands what her character has been. And he has this long verbal exchange with her, and at the conclusion of it, he's able to talk to her about who the Messiah is and how to worship God. What Jesus was trying to get to as he interacted with this woman was to make the connection that he was providing living water to her. And they go back and forth with this dialogue. The topic changes quickly over the course of a very short conversation, but Jesus is moving it to a very important point. There are a couple of passages at the end of that exchange where the woman said to him, "I know that Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things." And Jesus said to her, "I who speak to you am he." And so Jesus reveals to this Samaritan woman that he's the long-awaited Messiah. And she runs into town and tells everybody what she's experienced. They all come out, and he spends a couple of days there and helps this entire town come to realize who he is.
So many biblical events happened right here.
There's just so many layers of history to this one spot.
I love the old city of Jerusalem. I love the alleyways and all the hundreds of little stores and everything.
The shops in the old city are varied. You have so many different types. Some are just like a couple of feet, and then some are full-blown shops. You can walk 20 feet into them.
And I know a guy who sells antiquities in town, and he's got a coin I think we want to look at. Hello. Jeremy, earlier today you had asked me about a denarius.
I did.
So I want to introduce you to Zach.
Nice to meet you.
He's got a store here in the old city. He has a denarius.
You're talking about the tribute penny when Jesus said, "Show me dinar"?
Yes.
That's exactly right.
Yes.
Yes, because this is a specific dinar that was used by Caesar Tiberius. Please.
There it is.
Feel.
Oh, look at the impression on that. That's a beautiful coin.
The coin itself was not that large, probably about the size of a dime.
Just a little bit bigger than a button on a shirt.
The one he had was very well maintained. It still had a beautiful shine to it, and the relief on both sides was still remarkable.
Very light. It's a lot lighter than I would expect. Similar to aluminum, obviously much sturdier than that.
It's a low silver. It's not like sterling silver. They did not have enough fire to make as good silver as we have today. You know, Romans were very professional in making coins. And then when we understand coins, it opens very big windows in the New Testament. You know, this is the image of Tiberius. And who have seen the image of Tiberius have seen him. So they won't trick him, you know, shall we pay taxes or not, you know, just like to embarrass him. When we look at the dinar, we need to understand what is written. It's written here, Tiberius T. Caesar Diva, like divinity in Caesar Tiberius, which is against the Jewish law. The second side written in Tiberius Augustus, like he's the highest. It's even more against the Jewish law. But what's more shocking is his nickname. You can see here his nickname is Pontiff Maxime, like the highest priest. It was enough embarrassment for the Jews, or for the Pharisees specifically there. You're holding a coin for someone calling himself the highest priest. It's unkosher coin to be carried.
And Jesus teaching so much by using the impression on a coin. Whose face is on the stamp? This belongs to that person. Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's.
So that's why they left with no talking, and the story ended up over there.
And his ability to use a simple coin and a face on a coin to teach all of that says a lot about Jesus' ability to teach.
Yes, he was tough.
Yes.
He was a strong man that faced the Pharisees and embarrassed them on the spot.
Yes.
Show me dinar.
Well, and all of these things, rooted in the antiquities, help us understand that Jesus was real, these events were real, the coins that he spoke of were real. Zach, thank you for everything.
Yeah, see you again.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
See you
Good to
again.
see you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
From now on, every time that I read that event of the disciples asking Jesus about paying taxes, I'm going to be in Zach's shop with him pulling out that denarius and pointing out the inscription and the words around the side. We've been talking about Jesus and the teaching that he did in the Galilee area. We know that he spent a lot of time around Capernaum and on the north side of the Sea of Galilee, but we also read about him going to a place called the Decapolis. Is there anywhere that we can go that would show us what that looks like?
Well, the Decapolis was 10 cities that were of Greek and Roman heritage, and most of them were located on the eastern side of the Jordan River. However, there was one city that was located on the western side. That's the city of Scythopolis. That is also the same site of the Old Testament city of Beit Shan.
Is Beit Shan similar to some of the other villages and towns that we've visited so far, like Capernaum?
No, it's not, and I think that's one of the reasons why I think it's important for us to go. This was a Roman city during the time of Jesus, and it had a totally different look than a Jewish village. We're in Beit Shan, which in the first century was known as Scythopolis. The Decapolis was a group of 10 Greek and Roman cities, one of which fell on the western side of the Jordan River.
Realizing that Jesus came to Greek and Roman cities helps us to appreciate the truth of John the Baptist's observation when he saw Jesus. Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world.
The city of Beit Shan is steeped in biblical history. Even before the Israelites came into the land, the Canaanites lived there. Even before that, the Egyptians lived there for a while. It's best known to Bible students as the city where King Saul's body was hung after being killed over on Mount Gilboa.
And it's so different from the northern towns here in Galilee. When we think about Capernaum or even Bethsaida, they just seem so rural compared to how refined and large and big city upscale Beit Shan was.
Most of the cities that Jesus taught in around the Sea of Galilee were nothing more than really than villages, a few hundred people. Scythopolis would have been a community of several thousand. This was a Roman city with a cardo running north and south, with theaters, with bathhouses, with thousands of different people that lived there.
Usually when I think about Jesus going into a village or going into a town and teaching and preaching, he's preaching and teaching in a Jewish synagogue. And so it's actually kind of jarring, is the word that I would use, to think about Jesus and his Galilean apostles going into such an industrialized metropolitan place, and how much these men would have stood out when they went in. That just leaves such an impression on me.
We read about a number of situations in the scriptures in which Jesus came into a town and immediately the people flocked to him. My impression of when he walked into a place like Bethlehem, he would be at some level an unknown. They wouldn't know who he is until he started teaching.
All through Jesus' life, there are these little snippets that hint at the fact that he is a universal Savior. When his cousin John the Baptist in John chapter 1 encounters him and acknowledges, "This is the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world," that meant everybody. These little snippets where he passes through a Greek or Roman town of the Decapolis really highlight that truth. From the age of 12 years old, Jesus impressed people and made them marvel at his ability to teach and to communicate such profound truths about God in such simple ways. People were amazed with his authority and his conviction. Now, the Hebrew writer gives us a unique perspective looking back on Jesus' ability to teach, when he said, "Long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom also he created the world. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power." When people heard Jesus talking and teaching, he wasn't just another rabbi. He was the Son of God. He was divine. So the next time that you're studying through the teachings of Jesus, really think about the invitation that Jesus extends when he says, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear."